Next on the Best of John Miller, pack your bags and hold on tight. We're going on the road for a wild ride as we look back at some of John's travels.
Hang on!
The gold rush isn't over for one man in Alaska.
You know, I'm a little older than you think.
Also, head to Salt Lake City for a spin on a bobsled. Plus, we go whale watching in Washington State.
Fins came out of the water a couple of times and probably saw about 20 or 30 blowholes.
Then it's up to Canada, where John tries to forget a trip to the past and live it up in high style. That's all coming up next.
Discover the lighter side of Northwest living as Idaho's News Channel 7 presents the Best of John Miller.
Hello, I'm Steve Liebenthal. Today we are taking a trip around the West and out of the country, but you won't need an airplane ticket. John will take us to some places he's traveled during his years of bringing us Idaho life. The glory days of mining are long gone, or are they? John unearthed a little nugget near Haines, Alaska. It's called the Porcupine Mine, and the real treasure might just be the man doing the digging.
Want to tag along with John Schnabel?
Hang on!
You're in for a bumpy ride. John is apparently too young to know the gold rush is over.
You know, I'm a little older than you think.
So with sluicers sluicing and rocks rumbling, this 84-year-old prospector and a handful of assistants pick away at what could be the humblest gold mine in Alaska.
When I got out of the sawmill business, I retired. And in a few years, I had a triple bypass, and the doctor said, you better do something or you ain't going to live very long. So I decided to come up here and go mining. We've had days up as high as $15,000, and we've had days as low as $50.
For John, the most profitable days are simply the ones followed by a tomorrow. That way,
They're all good days, even if we don't get any gold.
the Porcupine Mine has, in the past, produced its share of precious metal, and once a gem of a story about a previous owner 70 years ago.
He dug a hole called the Glory Hole. And out of that hole, he took 4 one-quart jars of gold nuggets, which is a tremendous amount of gold. But he was so excited he had a heart attack and died that night.
John Schnabel hasn't struck it that rich, but then he hasn't died of a heart attack either.
I don't have a problem.
But he does have a grandson.
I think he got gold fever.
That's mine!
Wow, you did pretty good. Not as good as usual, but it's better than nothing.
In fact, after so many tons of rock and stones dumped and tumbled till day's end,
How did we do?
this haul is pretty modest.
3 ounces!
That is worth about $1,000.
But John Schnabel's never felt richer, knowing there's always tomorrow.
So that's pretty good. We can survive.
And John and his helpers say they find pert near $1,000 worth of gold every day. Pert near. Well, what would you do if you moved to the middle of nowhere in Alaska? You might have to find a hobby like Dave Paul did. John pounds out that story.
When I told the folks around here that I was going to start a hammer museum, well, I got laughed at a little bit, as you can imagine, probably mostly behind my back.
They really shouldn't laugh at Dave Paul. He does have more than 1,200 ways of knocking them upside the head.
Well, certainly there's blacksmithing hammers and cobbler's hammers. There's farrier's hammers for shoeing horses.
Snow knockers, broom makers, coopers, saddlers, and spring loaders.
And this is the banker's hammer for canceling checks.
Fancy hammers, fencing hammers, 4 rooms of hammers displaying Dave's driven determination,
Sometimes pounding to the extent of a headache.
telling Dave Paul not to let them forget.
The hammer was man's first tool from the time he picked up a rock and used it to smash open a nut or whatever. This is one of the oldest hammers in the Hammer Museum. It's at 300 AD. This is a Roman hammer.
This one's from the early settlers who wanted to travel light.
So they combined the function of a hammer with the hitch pin that connected the horses to the wagon.
One of the hundreds of unheralded, unusual, or unidentified historical hammers,
Waiting to be identified. I can't have enough hammers.
or enough reasons to travel the country collecting so many. Dave Paul's always proud to say,
Well, welcome to the Hammer Museum.
where you can, as the t-shirt says, get hammered in Haines, Alaska.
And a trip through the Hammer Museum will only cost you $2. Well, back in 2001, John followed the road to Salt Lake to look at preparations for the 2002 Winter Olympics. And in Park City, he got to be an Olympian for about a minute as he went screaming through 15 turns in about 53 seconds. John filed this story at about 80 miles an hour.
A ride on the bobsled. It seemed like a heavy proposition, especially after I met the dudes I'd be riding with.
I'm going to really depend on your guidance because I'm fragile.
No, I'm good.
And who wouldn't be hurtling down a frozen chute at 80 miles per hour?
Okay, no need to get worried.
Bobsled guru Derek Hendrickson said it would look something like this.
It's exciting. The G-forces are 5 or 6 times your body weight.
So what you're saying logistically and technically, this is nuts.
Yes. Yep.
So there we were, cramming ourselves in.
Legs there. All the way in. Yep.
Oh, nice. No cocktails and peanuts on this ride, huh?
Not here. No time.
Before you shove off on your 53-second death ride, you cross one arm over the other, let out a stupid little giggle, and you're all set.
Okay, visor down.
Thanks.
Here it is.
We were gone. A driver, 2 other reporters,
And John.
The rest is something of a blur. It must have looked something like this. Later, I was asked about my death ride.
That was intense, and you just kept thinking it was going to be over, and then wham, one more, and then wham, one more. I have no idea how that guy's steering that thing. Because, I mean, his head's in front of me just going like this.
Somehow, none of our heads fell off, and we lived for another day. Probably not for another ride.
You know, it looks fast when you watch it on TV, but it ain't nothing. It ain't nothing compared to what it's like on the sled. That was crazy.
And the track in Park City is more than 4/5 of a mile long, and it takes 60 miles of refrigerator tubing to keep the entire track covered in ice. It's open in the summer and winter, but it costs a bit more than the Hammer Museum. A ride there costs you around $65. This special edition of The Best of John Miller continues next. We head to Seattle in search of some 4-legged residents at the Kingdom Implosion. Also, they threw him out last time, but now the Canadians are welcoming John with a limo and luxury hotel. Find out why next. Back in 2000, it was doomsday for the Seattle Kingdom. After 24 years, the arena came crashing down in a cloud of dust. Thousands witnessed the incredible implosion, but it's the tiny witnesses you couldn't see who interested John Miller. So we sent him to Seattle to be on hand for the demolition.
It's the biggest show ever held at the Kingdom. It's also the last, and this time the best seats are on the outside. Inside, 21 miles of cable connected to more than 4,000 pounds of explosives ready to bring down the roof on the old home of baseball's Mariners, football's Seahawks, and who knows how many furry little residents that called the Kingdom home. While thousands lined the streets, trees, and rooftops, poised and ready for what they were about to see, Tamara Fosnot was quietly considering what they could not.
Rats.
I'm looking for some mayhem, actually.
And Tamara of XL Pest Control believed mayhem might come when thousands of rats, possibly living beneath the Doom Dome, got the jolt of their lives.
I think that the rats will probably scatter. I don't mind rats.
After all, as one guy put it,
All the rats are in City Hall.
oh, leaving this crowd,
Not concerned.
nor it appeared, were the rats. What's happening right now underground?
They're probably scrambling.
Sort of like the street crews. As dust blotted out the sun, insulation fell like rain, and the masks came on. And while the Merchants Cafe readied another order of Kingdom on a shingle, underground tour guide Dana Cox surveyed the rat situation 14 feet below.
Those that survived might be rejoining us.
But it appears
Not yet. So if they aren't running down 2nd Avenue and they aren't running through your tour underground, where would they be?
In heaven?
Yeah, it was a pretty big building, wasn't it?
It was.
Now, a cement souffle, and if the Kingdome's rats aren't dead or depleted, perhaps they're still running for the safety of Safeco.
Later, John goes to Canada and takes the ride to the top of one of the world's tallest buildings.
Of 553 meters, which is equivalent to 147 building stories high.
First, though, he visits an island near Seattle looking for whales. The best of John Miller continues after this. Welcome back. Before the break, we showed you John's visit to Seattle for the Kingdome implosion. On that same trip, he went in search of other stories, so he hopped into a car and got a whale of an idea.
Here's something fun to do when you're visiting the Seattle area. Get on the Mukilteo Ferry. Drive carefully, because you don't want to pull an Ashley Judd. That movie, Double Jeopardy, was filmed on Whidbey Island, just a 20-minute ride across Puget Sound. Here, you'll find this tiny town,
The thriving metropolis of Langley.
where all is artistic and antique, and you might catch Randy Woodward bagpiping smack in the middle of downtown. And every Saturday at 3:30, the entire town eats ice cream. Why does everybody eat ice cream at 3:30?
Because it's yummy.
Oh, yeah? Talk about happy hour.
Ice cream hour.
And here, everyone and their dog spends so much time leaning over this rail, staring at the sound, they even built a monument to it. What's everybody doing here?
They're watching for whales.
The spring migration of gray whales on their way from California to Alaska.
Fins came out of the water a couple of times and probably saw about 20 or 30 blowholes.
In fact, those divots in the sand were made by whales digging for shrimp during high tide. But you should know that whale migrations are governed strictly by Murphy's Law. And if you bring a video camera and wait for Langley's whales for 2 hours, you're probably going to go home with 2 hours of ice cream.
Ice cream cones.
Of course, on Whidbey Island, a double scoop of butter pecan is a close second to a gray whale.
But he was beautiful, just beautiful.
And I missed it.
Certainly. But if you stick around and you're patient, we may see it again.
Still to come, a visit to Canada and a very wet trip on a river near Montreal. First, though, John goes to Toronto, where he discovers that maybe the Canadians don't hate him after all.
The exit papers. Let me help you with that.
Well, if you keep up to date with John Miller's travels, you'll probably remember the time in 1999 when he tried to visit Canada but was turned away quite rudely at the border. Well, the next year we sent him back with a passport as part of the 2000 River Festival. This time he sailed through customs bound for the eastern provinces. Here's how it all began in Toronto.
You know, it is a long way from Canada to Canada. We ought to know. We tried to get here before. Remember this little episode? When photographer Gary Salzman and I tried to drive a large RV over the Canadian border, we made it 24 feet into Canada before we were given exit papers and kicked straight out. We left knowing there'd be a day when they'd beg us to come back, they'd plead for our forgiveness, and things would be different. So now that we're here, what are we supposed to do with these exit papers?
The exit papers. Let me help you with that.
This time, limousines provided our rides, world-class restaurants provided our food, five-star hotels provided our lodging. Last time, Winnebago provided all three.
You want these back?
No, not really. In fact, it's hard to compare Boise, the biggest city in Idaho, to Toronto, the biggest city in Canada. With the help of our guides, we thought we'd give it a shot.
We saw all the big buildings.
You've got the big CN Tower up there, too.
We're the world's tallest freestanding structure in the world,
It takes nearly a full minute to ride to the top.
with a total height of 1,815 feet, or 553 meters, which is equivalent to 147 building stories high.
Have you heard of the building we have in Boise? It's called the U.S. Bank Building.
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
It's a whopping 19 stories.
Is that right?
But if you did want to compare Idaho's tallest building to Canada's, you'd have to stack it end to end almost 10 times. No wonder this is the tallest building in the world. Here's the view from the world's highest observation deck.
Occasionally we do see people who are a little nervous of the height.
Especially here on the glass floor level, where most people choose to look rather than leap onto the see-through surface, a third of a mile above the city and the Sky Dome, Toronto's mammoth baseball building, which, by comparison, could hold the Boise Hawks Memorial Stadium 11 times over.
We've got people here from 100 different countries. We speak over 100 different languages in the city.
And Gary and I decided there's 100 reasons to visit, because some things just don't compare.
Quite a change there. Here's one more comparison. The population of Toronto and its surrounding communities are 6 times the population of the entire state of Idaho. Next, on the travel edition of The Best of John Miller, it's on to Montreal, where John visits a church that is truly a religious experience for many believers.
The interior is stunning. It's all hand-carved in wood and took about 40 years to do.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's go back to the summer of 2000 when John visited Canada. He said enough of the old buildings, culture, and history. The folks in Montreal have other plans for their tourists. When they talk about their past, they don't sit you on a tour bus. They strap you in a jet boat. John never expected Canadian life could get so wild and so wet.
When you visit a big city like Montreal, it's good to have the lovely Fiona Malins driving you around.
So, you're our guide for today, huh?
Right. Welcome to Montreal.
Fiona showed us the view from Mount Royal, which gave Montreal its name. We saw the Notre Dame Basilica.
It was built in the 1820s, but actually the interior is stunning. It's all hand-carved in wood and took about 40 years to do.
So tell me, Fiona, is there anything else tourists like to do in this town?
Oh yes, now we have a very popular activity on the river.
What's that?
And that's going jet boating.
Jet boating?
Mm-hmm.
My fellow Americans.
Welcome to Montreal. Now, we're going to drown you.
However, this trip is always fun, always exciting.
The loud guy is Jet Boat Jack, who takes great pleasure in sending as many IBM employees out to drink as much of the St. Lawrence River as humanly possible.
There you go, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And after we're all decked out like giant yellow Teletubbies,
Groovy.
me, our captain and crew, the lovely Fiona, and a boatload of computer geeks are off to learn why early explorers looking for China had to settle for Montreal.
How high are the waves gonna get?
They get like 6 to 12 feet.
6 to 12 feet high?
Far too much for early settlers, and it would appear some of IBM's finest.
You know, I'll bet this is much more exciting than the IBM company picnic.
Must be.
Oh! Je suis un peu foyer!
And for someone dressed in yellow, the lovely Fiona was looking a little green, but apparently feeling much better than our computer friends learning the French-Canadian translation of brainwash. A good time in any language, though back at the dock you'll never see so many IBM employees so happy to see Jet Boat Jack again.
Ponchos and life jackets, move it. Let's go.
Never to forget getting soaked to the circuit boards in Montreal.
And the jet boats also run in Ottawa and near Niagara Falls. A ride will cost you about $54 Canadian. Well, you've probably seen it on a postcard, on TV, or in a magazine. Nova Scotia's lighthouse at Peggy's Cove has likely been photographed 1,000,000 times. Now it's 1,000,001 as John continues his look at Canadian life.
The population of Peggy's Cove is 62 people. It's little more than a lighthouse and a post office. In fact, during the summer months, the lighthouse is the post office.
So how many people stop by every day?
Oh my gosh, there's thousands.
That's why Elaine Hasland and Shaughnessy Hamilton spend less time sorting mail than answering questions.
It's 64 feet high, I can tell you that.
Built in 1914, it still burns brighter than ever, beckoning a steady stream of photographers to this edge of the Atlantic Ocean.
Which would also technically make you the most photographed post office in the world.
Technically, yes.
Toby Hilton found his way here all the way from North Carolina.
It's in a great location. From a photographic point of view, it's wonderful.
How many years do you have to work here before you get to go upstairs?
Probably forever.
Really?
Yeah.
The door is kept locked and the Coast Guard holds the key. But Toby is content to soak up all that surrounds the Peggy's Cove Lighthouse.
The sun, the sea, smell, the history. It's a little bit of everything. It takes you back and makes you remember things.
What's it make you remember?
How hard it used to be for people to come across the ocean, to get in, they're going by a compass, how really difficult it was.
And how one single shining light can be such a savior.
Very simple and very direct. Find that lighthouse and I know where I'm at.
And we'll see you next week for the best of John Miller.